Exciting.
Da 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 da. So,
Good afternoon. Happy Monday, Andy.
happy Monday, Bambos. I think it's quite fun that we often get these beautiful moments where the guests sort of can't quite get online. And it always seems to happen when I've done some promotion for the show. Like whenever I've gone that extra effort to say, hey, Jane Elliott, we got Jane Elliott on the show. And then all of a sudden it's like she's got a storm and her Wi-Fi doesn't work. So today I sent out some links because we have Peter von Zeijderveld. His mother worked for the Dutch resistance, I don't know what you could work for. She was in the Dutch resistance. She seduced men and she took them away and then they got killed. The Germans, the Nazis, when they occupied. And she did that. And it was a very secretive part of their family history. I also was part of it. I also, in the sense of, I got like little details here and there as I knew this woman. So we're going to discuss how it is. Hopefully we're going to discuss this if we can get him online, how it is to have a mother that was a spy. And we're going to do that on Bambos. Bambos isn't in a good mood today, by the way. So you got no plane. If you're not going to, you have to either be here or be square.
I'm square.
Okay. On a Wonderful Chaos.
Thanks, Dad.
We just had a little offline discussion. Sometimes Bambos, when he works hard, he's not fully
Present.
So
when I came in, I'm like, Andy, I'm not embodied today.
Yeah, and I think that's great because in that, it's the first time we get the opportunity to just be present with it and allow it to be okay. Instead of it being one of those things that I talk more on the show and everyone says, hey, doesn't Bambos ever get a chance to speak?
No, because you talk too much.
Exactly. Or it would be your show where we would do the quiet, just standing there like this the whole time. Yeah. And that could be a whole nother show. We did that once. That was The Sound of Silence. That was maybe your favorite show. That was cool. We actually spent an hour just looking and just being with silence. That was really cool. Yeah. So what help me understand what is going on from your side?
I haven't had time to catch up with myself.
Oh, really?
And before this, I had a workshop.
Uh-huh.
And it just feels that I'm holding back all these tears and waiting to get home to let them out.
Wow. And that came out of the workshop.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So when I named it, it was me doing it differently.
Yeah. I find it's interesting when you say what you're like, if I ever have to do anything where I can't be fully present with the emotions, then I always feel disconnected. Like really, it's like, oh, if I can't just allow myself to be in this moment with the emotion I'm having and I have to pretend for
an hour,
that's like the worst for me.
It is the worst.
But I don't have any, at least I don't, I believe I found my coping mechanisms on how to deal with that. Yeah. It's not all that dissimilar maybe from what you just did, is saying, hey, I'm just not in a good place. It was, remember in the book when I was in the tour and I went to Boston and the first thing I said is, I so don't want to be here. Like that was the way I started my workshop. It was as if like that would in general be like not the way you'd think you'd start a successful session.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me start by saying I don't want to fucking be here, and it's fucking great.
And this has nothing to do with Peter. Let's get that clear. He's waiting in the wings thinking, what the hell? I'm invited and he doesn't want to be there.
There's one more statement.
What's that?
There's one more statement. Oh, there's one more fuck. It doesn't come to me. I'm taking up space and it's fucking great.
Nice. Yeah. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel more spacious anyway if I name it.
Yeah.
Then I feel I'm grounding a little bit more.
Yeah.
I would like to have some support on this show. If you see me drifting, I'd love that you give me a double tap or whatever.
Yeah.
But now that I've said it, I'll probably double tap myself.
Yeah. Beautiful. Peter
van
Zeijderveld. I have a very interesting backstory to this moment together.
You know his mother.
Peter's mother and I mean, I felt close to her, right? She lived across the street from Kukai, the restaurant I managed for years. And I would bring her food when she didn't have dinner. I'd sit together with her maybe for half an hour, and we'd talk. And little by little, as I spent time with her, I began to hear her story. And I learned that she worked, or she was part of the Dutch resistance. And then I learned that she would seduce men, take them away, and then they'd be killed. And this part of her life was so scary and raw for her, even at her old age. I don't even realize how old, but we'll talk to Peter, get her age. She would be whispering when she talked about it, because she was always worried that the Germans would come back. So she lived in that constant fear. And what was weird is that I came to the Netherlands from Vienna. So I spoke German. So whenever I spoke Dutch, I'd speak Dutch with German words. And every time a German word would come out of my mouth, I'd see her face kind of like vibrate, like cringe, like, because she had such raw connection to that time. She even had a bullet that was shot through her window, and she refused to get the window changed because it was a reminder that the Germans were always nearby.
In the place of Kukai?
Yes.
Wow.
So she had this window that was always with a bullet in it, because she always felt like, I don't want to forget that there's always the Germans nearby. So when we were doing the show, there was a Dutch BBC show that came out, I think maybe a month ago, which highlighted exactly the women that were doing this. So they would seduce the men, take them away, and it was on it made BBC, and then it was also on the newspapers. And I thought, when I saw that, I thought, wow, I'd love to bring Peter on and talk to him about that. How it was to live with a mother that had that past, how he found out about it, and all that kind of stuff. So that was what I was excited to have him on.
Nice.
And he has gotten technologically there. We can see him in the wing, so we'll bring him on right now. Hello, Peter.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hey. Very, very good.
Yeah. I'm fine also.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to be here.
Yeah.
It had some problems, but
yeah, we got there.
Yeah, we got there. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because to some degree, when when your mom, Tante Rick was her name, of course. For me, she was Tante Rick. I felt very much almost like an extended part of your family, because in some ways, being with her, there was a beauty in being with her that was just incredible to be around.
Yeah, but she had that same feelings to you and Kees and Kai.
Yeah.
You know, she was very intimate with you three guys.
Yeah.
Because because she told things that she would never tell to a stranger. Never. No, never.
Yeah.
Not there are, when she went older, then she began to talk about the war. She never spoke about the war. Never. She always said, you know, enemies are not sleeping. That's what
the enemies are not sleeping.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. When were you aware of your mom's background? Like, when did you find out about her efforts during the war?
Well, I think that was at a very young age already, because my mother had nightmares, but I couldn't. I was not so old, and it was strange that your mother has nightmares. My father was an open book about the war, because he was in a camp during the war. And he was always talking about the war in the camp and what happened there. But my mother, she said nothing, absolutely nothing. While she gets older, the stories came. I think I was 23, 24. In that time that she began to talk about the war. Yeah.
Wow. And the first time she talked about it, were you surprised in hearing how she was not only, of course, living during the war, but how she actually was part of the resistance?
Well, you know my mother as a very gentle woman.
You know what? You say that. She was one of the strongest women I knew, regardless of her age. So
yeah, but she to people she didn't know, she could be terribly hard. You know, and yeah, she was the sweetest creature on earth, but she was also the hardest creature on earth. Yeah.
Sounds like she had to.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had to. It's example, there was she was going to the bank on the Roosgracht, and she passed by a guy with a jogging suit, and yeah, he was wearing a wig, and she entered the bank, and that guy went after her, and he pulled a gun on my mother's head, and he spoke German, and he said, "Give me the money, or I shoot the old lady." And my mother, she didn't throw. She did. No, she was very cool, and suddenly the employee in the bank, he threw money on the floor, but he wanted to go. That robber wanted to go into behind the counter, and there was a kind of portal, and they opened the door of the portal, and he pushed my mother in, and he had his feet between the door and so that it couldn't close.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to grab the money what was lying on the floor, and he pulled his feet about an inch back, and my mother closed the door. And what she said, "Is it safe here?" And that's the only thing she said. Is it safe here? And when the police came and the policeman said, do you want to talk with somebody? Can we give you a drink? And my mother said, oh no, I'm going to the HEMA because I have to get some wool. I'm knitting a sweater. And she took the tram and she went to the Nieuwe Dijk and she went to the HEMA. That's my mother.
Yeah.
You know, and she had a gun on her head. That's very strange.
Feels like it was
And
a
she
normal.
said
Yeah.
and she said, I have the trigger was that guy spoke German.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the gun, it was the accent.
Yeah, it was the language. And
Yeah.
then she was falling in a completely different mode. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I mentioned earlier, whenever I spoke in it, like I'd slip in the German word in place of the Dutch word, she'd always jump, she'd wince, and it was so visceral that I saw it wasn't a game. It was actually like an old reaction from something very deep inside of her. So I had to improve my Dutch only not to incite or trigger her. I remember speaking very articulate when I was with your mom, compared to others. Yeah.
So how were you dealing with it then when she would get triggered?
I think at first it's, when you notice someone react to something, you can do two things, which you can either not think about it or not. I'm always thinking, what is it I don't see? Something's going on here I don't yet understand. And it was only in time more and more of the stories of your mom came out. I mean, it was interesting because, I could cry now. I'm sure you're going to cry because we're both kind of pathetic that way. But when we were, remember, I mean, of course, I sat with your mom and recorded my talk with her for an hour.
Yeah.
That just asking her about the war and things. And then it was only, I think, after maybe it was 3 years after her death, I think I sent you that video recording of that conversation.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, she was when the war broke out, she was 16 years, and her cousins were all wrestlers, and there was a wrestling club in Amsterdam North.
Yeah.
What's the resume?
And
wrestling, and that's where the resistance movement had its base. And her cousin Freek Ox, he was the commander of that group, and he was in the war. He shot in the Terpenstraat. He had a fight with Germans on the street, and he was shot. There is still a remembering stone. How do you call that?
Yeah, remembrance stone.
In the wall. Yeah, in the wall over there. And so she and her niece and other families, Ricky, can you bring that some papers or and that when she was 18, it went more and more and more and more. They were smuggling guns. They went to the swimming pool, and she seduced the German guys, and the German guys went with her and my aunt out the door, and then they knocked them out or they killed them for the uniforms, the weapons, and the IDs and all that kind of stuff.
She never liked to talk about that. Did she ever share that story with you, or did you hear that from others?
Well, I have from 45, my mother never won a pension of the war, but I said, Ma, you have fought in the war, you have right on that pension. So she became that pension, but there was also an investigation with witnesses and people who worked with her. And I have that report here. And and that says a lot. She was
Wow.
infiltrated in a later time, infiltrated in the SD, in the Sicherheidsdienst. Freek said, he said to my mother, Riek, there are a lot of boys from other resistance movements of groups in Amsterdam. They are being arrested. And there is a cafe in the Amstelstraat. He said, I want you to go there, go work there or drink or do, and find out what is going on. So my mother went there, and it was she worked there behind the bar. And there was a Jewish girl. Her name was Mary. And she had a tattoo in her arm. So she was in a camp before. And she was a very pretty woman. And she seduced the guys from the resistance. And the Sicherheidsdienst arrested those boys. But my mother, she became friends with her, and suddenly she said, Riek, we are going to a party on the Koninginnenweg. And there was a big house on the Koninginnenweg, and Hitler was on the wall, and all high military Germans in uniforms, and they asked her if she could work for the Germans inside the Sicherheidsdienst. So she worked with the Sicherheidsdienst, not knowing that she was a kind of spy. She was a spy because all the information that she could get was going to the resistance movement.
She was a double agent, actually.
She was, yeah. She spied for the resistance inside the SD.
Wow.
And that Freek Ox and Ferry Ploeger were arrested, and they brought to the headquarters of the Sicherheidsdienst that was in the Terpenstraat. Then my mother was on the way with Jewish children to Oostvoorne, and they sent a courier after my mother, and he had the message that she must not return to Amsterdam because she will be arrested and she will be shot.
Wow.
So the rest of the war she set out in Oostvoorne. That was in, I think January 45 or so.
That was 45.
That was not long. Yeah, that was 45.
Wow, because at some point, if you're playing both sides, they're going to figure that out.
Yeah. And that girl, Mary, so the resistance group arrested Mary. Also, I think that guy, his name was Jan Kemp. He was also a collaborator. They arrested those people. They gave them a trial, and they were liquidated. Yeah, they were shot. Yeah.
By the Nazis? By the Nazis now? No.
No. By the resistance.
By the resistance, because they were acting as agents. Okay.
Yeah, they were working for the Nazis.
Wow.
And but my mother and her friends were always swimming in a canal by the WWII, at WWII. You know it, WWII?
Yeah, of course.
And that has some canals at the side, and they were always swimming there. And 6 months later, my mother was swimming, and there was something floating to the surface, and that was Mary. That was Mary. So the boys from the resistance, they brought some stones on her, and they sang her again to the bottom.
Wow.
That's what she told me.
Is that that's what your mom told you?
That's what my mother told me. Yeah.
Do you feel like she told you everything, or do you think that there are things she just didn't want to relive, so she didn't talk about them?
She didn't told me everything.
Yeah.
No.
It sounds like she relived in her dreams, right?
Yeah.
She was always afraid, and what she also always said was the people that we fought and the people we harmed in the war, they had also children and grandchildren, and she didn't want that it came out in the world.
Yeah.
No.
I remember because there would often be they'd be celebrated, the people that worked in the resistance. And they
Yeah.
were given, I think she was even given a medal, as far as I remember, at some point.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. She never wanted to participate in any of that for fear that there'd be reprisal against her.
Yeah. That's correct. Yeah.
Amazing.
But
By
she
the way,
never went. She never went to the Dam, with dodenherdenking. Never.
Yeah.
And she said also. Now she said the people who did nothing in the war are sitting in the front. The people who had done nothing, they didn't fought, they place them in the front. And the people who really did fought in the war, they are something in the crowd.
Wow.
And she said, I don't want
because
to go
you say the Denk is basically the people that were shot basically at the end of World War II, where they were just on the street celebrating.
Yeah.
But the people that were in the resistance, they sort of were forgotten, let's say.
Yeah,
or not taken care of.
Yeah.
We have an interesting statement, which I think is interesting. Bolalang, who is from South Africa, he writes, Afrikaans language still triggers him, even now, when he wants to also be fluent in it, which is fascinating.
Huh.
Can you imagine?
He was raised during apartheid, so he's lived the experience of that behind him. So I can imagine there's trauma connected to language, clearly.
Peter, I'd love to ask you on a little bit of a different subject, and actually into you as you were growing up.
Yeah.
Like how was it for you? Do you have brothers and sisters, first of all?
I have one sister. She is 17 years older than me. I'm the youngest.
Wow.
My mother was in the 40 years old that I was born. Yeah.
And how was it for you to be raised by these two different polarities, actually?
How was it? It was. I had a wonderful youth, really. But there were some things that, if you're a little boy and your mother is screaming in her sleep, and that's not good for a little child. No. But in a further stage, when I was growing older, I accepted that, because I knew what she had done and what she had been through. I couldn't say that it's hard or so. No, you're used to it. And the war was always in our house, always. So with my father, more with my father than with my mother. My mother was always silent. She didn't talk much.
When you say it was always in the house, in what way? How did that look? How did it manifest?
How it manifest? Well, everything what is being done in our family, that has a relation with the war, always a kind of fear, and also a kind of aggression in some situations. In the 60s and the 70s, it was much more than in these days, because all the people who had who were in the war, they were also alive. Now that generation is going away. And my father, he was, with the remembrance, with all the herdenking, and a car didn't stop on the Rozengracht. Well, all the guys in the neighborhood, there was a fight. Yeah, you had to stop. You had to stop. If you didn't stop, that was not
just for the people
acceptable.
listening. For the people listening who don't know, it's on. What's the date? Is it April? What's the date with the
4th of May?
It's May 4th. On May
May
4th,
4th, yeah.
there's a moment which I've never had this moment in any other country I've lived in. There's one, is it a single minute of silence where everyone is asked just to stop whatever they're doing and sit and just stand or sit in quiet. That's something I've never experienced in any other country that I've ever lived in. And you're telling me that if people refused or didn't do that, that basically those that had strong attachment to the actual that time would let them know about it.
Yeah. And it could be in a hard way. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
When I was born in '63, I was a baby, and my mother always said, "I don't hate the Germans." She just hates the Germans who are in her age.
Oh, wow.
You know, and she always said, the children of the Germans who were in the war, they couldn't help that what was happened. And by example, when I was a baby, she walked over the Rozengracht. I was in the, how do you say it, kinderwagen?
Yeah.
How do you say kinderwagen?
Pushchair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Buggy.
the buggy, in the buggy. And there was a man and a woman, they were passing by and they were looking into the buggy and they said, in German, "Oh, that's a wonderful baby." And my mother, she looked to those people and she said, "Das ist ein Jude." She said.
She says it's a Jew.
Yeah, it's a Jew.
Ah.
She said it to yeah. But those people, the man and the woman, they were the same age as my mother.
Yeah.
And
how did you hear that story? Because I imagine if you were the baby, you wouldn't actually have known that happened.
No, she told that.
Oh.
She has told me that.
Yeah.
That was happening. Yeah.
Wow.
And there is also, I don't know if that's if it's true, but I have the idea that my mother is a Jewish girl.
Oh.
Because I can't find that picture anymore, but there is a picture that she's walking on the dam in 1940, and I think my sister has that picture. And she was wearing a Star of David. And so I found that picture, and I asked my mother, "Ma, why are you wearing a Star of David? Are you a Jewish woman?" "No, I did that out of protest," she said that. But I was thinking, if all the Jewish people are arrested and deported to Westerbork and to Auschwitz, why are you going to walk on the street with a yellow Star of David on your coat out of protest? And also she had a little Star of David in a drawer, and I found it. It was a silver one, and it was silver and blue. And I think, that's nice. So I did it on my neck, and I wore that Star of David. And she saw that I was wearing that Star of David, and she said, "Come here and take it off." I said, "Well, why have I to take it? It's just a nice star." Now she said, "Son, your enemy doesn't sleep," she said. So I had to take it off, and it was putting back to the drawer. I've got no idea. There are my cousins from my mother's brother. They are convinced that we are Jewish related. Yeah. But I don't know it for sure. No.
Interesting. Well, what was your mom's maiden name?
Yeah, that's also a story.
It changed.
Yeah, it you know, it is Postma, Posma is a name from Friesland, and it's in Friesland.
Okay.
But it's also coupé. It's French. And I have been searching, had some research for that name coupé, and I can't find anything. Nothing. Totally nothing.
So you think that name may have been made up?
No, I think that name isn't in Holland anymore.
Okay.
I think those people are gone. And in the earlier days, when a woman divorced from her husband, and in 6 months she was having a baby, then the baby was becoming the name of the divorced man. And I think that's what in the past has happened.
Okay.
And but I've got no clue, and you really know.
Mm-hmm. Your mom, for people who don't understand or spend any time, which most wouldn't, understanding the Dutch mentality. Within the Dutch mentality, there's the Jordanese mentality, which is a segment in a segment.
Yeah.
And so if I look at your mom, I think I learned more about being Dutch from your mom than maybe anyone else. Mm-hmm. Because you mentioned if she was walking on the street and she didn't like something that someone was doing, then she would be as direct and as strong as anyone I'd ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
It could be a guy muscular with tattoos and she wouldn't care. She'd go right up into their face and she would tell them what she was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Always.
And like, how is it to be raised with that? Because in some ways I've never experienced you that way. So in some ways it must have also been a bit like strange to have a mom that was that strong.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
my dad was strong, and it used to embarrass me. So I'm almost wondering if it's similar for others, or if they're like, "Oh, great, mom!" If it's so normal that people are strong in the Netherlands, for instance.
Well, I never had any problems with that. No, I wasn't embarrassed. Also, not with that. No.
Yeah.
No.
But I think that's cultural, because if someone yelled at you, like, if on the street someone isn't showing respect for the 1 minute of silence, there's different ways of going about like dealing with it. One way is picking a fight, which is what I heard was pretty common in your environment. Yeah. Another way is saying, "Hey, please respect the minute."
Yeah. In the later years that were coming, that was okay. But in the earlier years, when I was a boy 5-6 years old, it was really a fight with the guys, with the older men on the Roosgracht.
Yeah.
A lot of men who are from the Jordan, they have been in the camps. My father, he didn't want to work in Germany, and he wanted to stay home, and he was arrested by Veldwebel. There was a German with a kind of military police, and they put him in the jail in the Klein Gartmanplantsoen, Berlaatse.
Okay.
And he was in the jail for 6 months, and I've seen those cells. They were very little. They were 2 by 2.5 meters, and they were there, with 6 people in those cells. It was, and then they took him out, and he had to work in Germany. He didn't want to work in Germany, so he escaped. He came back to Holland. They arrested him again, and then he went to Amersfoort, to the concentration camp, and he was also there for 6, 7, 8 months. Then again to Germany, and because he doesn't want to work for the Germans, he smashed his hand with a big hammer, so it was all crushed, and he escaped again from Germany, and he walked from. It was a very cold winter in that time. He had no shoes. He had a bald head, and there were some rags around his legs and his feet, and there was a lot of snow. So he walked from Kaldenkirchen naar Venlo. With the car, it's not so far, but I think if it's minus 10 or 15 degrees below zero, and you have to walk that with no shoes, and that's a long way. And he was dead tired, and there was a truck coming on the road, and he stopped the truck, and the driver was working for his grandmother's brother. His uncle had a transporting company, and they were driving vegetables and fruits. So the driver, he hid my father behind the empty crates, and he drove back to Amsterdam. But yeah, he had to. My mother, another assistant, they was searching a hideout for him, and my mother, she brought my father to that hideout. That's how they met with each other. Yeah.
How was it? I mean, as you talk about your parents, like we would aspire to behave that way in the same situation, and maybe a fraction of society would.
Yeah. My mother always said, you never know how you react in such a situation, what you would do. And I asked her also, Ma, was it an ideological? Ideological, or what was it? She said, yeah, well, I didn't like the Germans, but it was also exciting. I was 16, 18 years old, and we were doing things what wasn't allowed. So there was something, and she said that was rather more important than fighting the Germans. Yeah.
Wow.
I think in that she went older, that she went 20 or that changed, because they know that the people were the Jewish people were brought to Auschwitz and to the concentration camps, and young boys were in Russia. They went to Germany. So yeah, that changed. But in the beginning, it was just exciting to do that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because you think that's she's 16 to 18. She's probably still feeling a bit invincible. And that, and there's, But could you imagine being 16 or 18, seducing soldiers, knowing you're taking them to get killed? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
And then her saying, you know what? I don't want anyone to know of what I did, because those people also had children, and I don't want those children to come after me with revenge.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. So, and not that they are coming after my mother, but that they are coming after me or my sister or our children. I think that's more the behind laying thought what she had. Yeah. And my mother doesn't interest isn't interest that what become to her. She if someone shot my mother, she think, okay, that's fine, but don't touch my children.
Yeah. What was that? I mentioned the story about her leaving the bullet in the glass and never changing it. How was it for you to have like that discussion with her around that? Like, what did that feel or look like?
Yeah, it was just a bullet hole in the window, and I've one time I have asked from Ma, how is that bullet hole is coming into the window? Oh yeah, there's a shootout on the street with the Germans. That's it. There was no story connected. There were also people in the Jordan after Spertijd. Spertijd?
No.
Behind, if it was 8 o'clock, the people were not allowed to go on the street.
Oh yeah, it was a curfew.
Curfew.
Yeah.
Curfew. And I think it was Omi Jantje Beck. It was a man who was living in the Rozenstraat, and he was a couple of minutes after 8 with his little boy on his arm, and it was perhaps 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and there was a German patrol coming around the corner, and they shot, and he killed that little child. That's really happened in the street. So he was on the street. He wanted to enter his house. That soldier fired his gun, and that little boy was dead. And I think if you see all that kind of things and you heard those kind of things in that time, yeah, that you are going berserk. Yeah.
When I'm listening to you, Peter, I have to think of my father, because he was actually, when he was 16, during the British occupation in Cyprus, he was the newspaper boy. Yeah. And the British wanted to get information, and who knows everyone in the village. Let's go to the newspaper boy, and they took him for 2 months and they tortured him.
Yeah.
And my grandmother said when he came out, they didn't recognize him, like something died.
Yeah.
And I was always thinking about my father, that he never socially behaved normal ever again. Like, he would do things which looked normal because that was my context, but later on in life I was like, fuck, he was nuts.
Yeah.
And I mean, can you connect to that experience?
With my mother, no. With my father, yes. My mother was always a sweet woman. She had never. I've never been hit by my parents. Never. Not by my father, not by my mother. Never. And I was not an easy boy. I was a terrible boy.
I believe that. I believe that, Peter. But how did it manifest in your father then?
Well, my father has been tortured in the camps. There was there an Oberscharführer. I think it's Oberscharführer. His name was Cotella. Wow. And that guy had always a leg from a table. Is that
yeah,
from a table? And well, that was his bet to hit the prisoners, always. And he also told me they called it the Rose Garden. There was barbed wire. There was a meter wide. There's 2 fences with barbed wire, and on the floor was sand. But there's very fine sand what they have in a bird cage, and so they placed prisoners in the Rose Garden, and they that sand was very tidy, was very smooth, and when you shoved your feet a little bit, so because you were standing there for 24 47 hours, that it's not 2 hours, it's just a couple of days, and every time you did your foot the other way, and Cotella saw that in the sand that you had moved, he pulled you out, and he brutally
he hit you.
So he hit you in a terrible way. My father's hearing was gone, and his back was broke, and his knees were and that was just a game for that guy. Also, the feeding the ducks. My father called it feeding the ducks. And they were standing, all the prisoners, on the place, the appel place, and it was muddy. It was raining, and they had old bread, what was molded, and then the Germans went to feed the prisoners. But those guys, he had terrible hunger. And so they were fighting for a piece of bread what was just infected, and they liked it. It was fun. And yeah, my father was really brutalized because his ausweis, there was a stain on his ausweis. En Cortella, die zag daar in de ijswaas is smutsig. En toen, ja, that was totally wrapped up. It had to be terrible, yeah. So my father had some behavior what I could place to that treatment that he had become in the camps. Yeah. My mother not. He was always cool. Was a very sweet woman. Yeah, my father was also a sweet guy. But he had.
But if you think about it, he suffered. Like if you were Jewish, you were just thrown in the concentration camp. He had the choice to support the German war machine by working in Germany, or going to a concentration camp and acting in resistance. In some ways, it's incredible if you think about it. Like, how strong do you have to be to say, I'm not going to support in this effort, and I'm going to suffer the consequences for that?
Yeah. Well, that's what he taught me also, and I'm also doing that to my kids. My father always said, never do something that you wouldn't like to do. Never.
Have done to you. Never do something you wouldn't want to have done to you.
Yeah. But also, if you say to me, never do something that you don't want.
Oh,
you have to, that's the never do something what you don't want to do.
It sounds like the most innocent, most insightful thing to say. Never do anything you don't want.
Yeah.
And yet people still do.
Now, but I give you an example. When I was in school and I was sent out of the class, we had to stand in the hallway. But I don't like to stand in the hallway. And so I went home. And then the school, then they called up my mother. Is Peter at home? Yeah, he's at home. Yeah, but he had to be in school. Oh, well, I sent him to school again. So I went back to school. And then the teacher said, why did you went away? I say, I was in the hallway. Yeah, but you have to be in the hallway. You had to. I say, yeah, but I'm not learning on the hallway, so I'm going home. So,
love it.
And I don't want to be on the hallway, so I'm going home. And my father said, that's okay, boy. My father said, that's fine.
I'd love to share another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on.
I would love to share a father story. So I was in Catholic school as a kid, and I think I was reasonably good, but every so often I would be not as good. And I guess I used a cuss word. I think I said fuck or something. And as a younger age, right? I still say it today. I think it just stuck. And my parents got called to the school, to the principal, to have the discussion. And so my parents were sitting there. I don't even know if they knew why they were coming, but they were told they had to come. And at the end of the conversation, the nun is told my mom and dad that that this is inappropriate, that this is just wrong, and you have to deal with it. And my dad said, if you're going to call me for a discussion, it better be for a better fucking reason than this.
I think that's the coolest story you've had so far.
My father was a bit of a rebel, I reckon. He taught me to drive a car when I was 12.
Wow.
So I could drive a car when I was 12. And they had a little garden house in Duivendrecht. There's a place outside Amsterdam. And when I was 14, and I said, Pa, can I take the car this evening? Yeah, that's okay. If you get caught by the police, just say you have stolen the keys. I took the car. I drove with my father from Davendrecht to our home.
At 12 years old.
Now it was 14, 15.
Okay.
And
Wow.
and one time we were caught by the police. He was sitting beside me, and that policeman asked for my driver's license. I said, "Yeah, I don't have a driver's license." And he said to my father, "You know that you can't drive a little boy like that." And my father said, "If Prince Bernhard can let drive his grandson, I can let drive my son."
Yeah.
Yeah. So
but that's typically Jordanese. Like that, what you're saying, that sums up the mentality of everyone that lives in the Jordan.
Yeah.
And it's slowly leaving because no one can afford to live there anymore. But it's a strong mentality. Incredible.
Yeah, but
strong mentality. Yeah.
When I hear the story, I hear if you've been tortured and suppressed and your rights have been taken away from you for such a long time, then there's a big fuck you to anyone.
Yeah.
Because no one else counts anymore. Like, I'm free now, so fuck you.
Yeah. In fact, if we look right now, what's going on around the world after the COVID lockdowns, and what you see is the big revolts of the big fuck yous to the government at the moment, which are, becoming their own movements. Yeah. Bambos has a great story that I'd love to share.
What's that?
Okay. We've already shared it 3 times, but I love it so much. And since Peter hasn't heard it before.
What's that?
It was a story about when you were driving and your dad was speeding and the police pulled you over. Do you want to share it or should I?
You can share it.
So and by the way, this is the nicest thing that Bambos has ever said about his father to me ever, just to get that clear before I tell you this story. They're driving and they get pulled over by the police. All of a sudden, Bambos' dad turns to him and smacks him on the face. Bambos begins to cry because he's just been hit by his father. The police come to the door. He rolls down his window, and his dad says, "I'm speeding. I got to get my kid to the hospital."
Huh? That's terrible.
It's horrible. It's a horrible story. The funny thing is, like, I also was driving from the age of 12, and when my dad left, I actually had the keys to the car. My mother couldn't drive, so I just drove until I got my license at the age of 18.
Oh, wow.
So I was illegally driving, and I'm like, listening to Peter, I was like, wow.
From what age did you start driving?
15.
From 15?
15, wow. I was driving, I was in my own little world, and when I look back and listen to Peter, I'm like, wow, that was allowed.
Yeah.
Like, my mother would never say anything.
Yeah. I often laugh about these social media posts, like what in the past we used to consider so normal and what today is like we're protecting our kids to, like in ways that, when we were kids, it's like, go ahead, play on the street. Don't worry about the cars. Just move out of the way. When you see, now you're not even allowed on the street to play. It's a very more protective society we live in at the moment.
Peter, are you living in the Jordan right now?
No, I can't afford it.
Yeah, no one can afford to live in the Jordan right now.
No, in the past, it was really much poverty in the Jordan.
Yeah. I know people from back then. They pay like 400 euros, but they've been living there forever. It feels like beautiful interiors. 400 euros in the center.
Yeah. I mean, my mother was paying also an amount like that, I think. But she lived 60 years in the street.
Yeah,
for 60 years.
The same place. And she lived with social housing, so there was always psychopaths living above her and stuff. There was always weird stuff going on. One thing that people might not know about the Netherlands, which is another unique thing, is they don't have psychiatric wards. They kind of put the people that are emotionally incapable, they filter them throughout the city. So basically, a social house might have one person who really belongs in a assisted care kind of mental institute, and they just let them kind of roam the streets here.
Yeah, strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
And get social benefits.
And they get social benefits. But I mean, what would always happen is on the street, there'd always be once a year, the woman who lived above your mom, she'd always be pulled out by, she'd be thrown in an ambulance at least once a year, taken away for a few weeks, and then she'd be brought back again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah.
And I can remember my father, he had Alzheimer, you know, Andy?
No, I didn't know that. Because I never met your dad. I only met your mom.
Okay, and my father had Alzheimer, and he was also every time on the attic in my room. That was my room when I was still living at home. And my mother said to Ernad, that woman who was living upstairs, close your door at the attic because my husband is going upstairs. He doesn't know what he's doing. He has Alzheimer, but she didn't close the door. She let that door open. And she went to my mother one day. She said, Tante Riek, Ome Nelis, your husband, he has taken things from my attic, paintings and records. And okay. She said, but I'm afraid for your husband. He's aggressive. My mother said, wait until Peter is coming. He's going up with you to the attic, and then we sort out your things and you have your belongings back, but close the door of your attic. Because my father, he was just tearing out the door. And in his mindset, he was repairing everything, but he demolished everything.
Yeah.
And so Ernad, she went to me and she said, would you like to go upstairs with me to your father to get my belongings? She said, okay. I went up and hey jongen, zei my father, what are you doing? She said, pa, I come to see how you're going over here, and do you have some stuff from Ernad? No, everything is mine. That's mine and that's mine.
Yeah.
So I took a painting. He said, but that doesn't belong to us, though. He said, no, that's not mine. He said, that's Ernad's stuff. Yes, I could give it back. And I did it a couple of times, and then suddenly Edna was grabbing a thing, and she said, oh, that's also mine. Wow, bang. And he was like a tiger. So I had to grab my father because he was really assaulting our upper neighbor, and I pushed him to the ground, and I said to him, Dad, he said, now it's over. He said, think. And my father had really big blue eyes, and he was looking at me, and he said, what the hell are you doing, boy? And then I broke. I really broke. To see that man in and that he doesn't do anything anymore. Nothing. That's and I think that also the war has a great influence in that disease of Alzheimer, because they had that there was not good food. They had, when you need nutrition and that kind of things. He didn't have that. Nothing. No.
Wow.
No. And they had to work really hard. Yeah.
Well, Peter, we've gone over our hour, but I needed to, of course, hear this last story because we didn't get to talk so much about your dad. Thank you for sharing. It was really beautiful to hear the lives.
It was nice to tell you about them.
Yeah. So I sort of knowing, also she was telling me everything in Dutch, and sometimes when she'd speak, I wouldn't quite understand her, even though I'd be sitting there, because she'd often repeat things as well in the end, right? She was also having a hard time, You know, I remember the one time I went to help her in the video, you would have seen she kept asking, when are they coming to fix the hot water? They're coming on Wednesday. And then about a minute later, she said, and when are they coming to fix the water?
My mother said always, oh, Andy was here. Yeah, he brought Thai food for me. It's a very nice boy. I love the boy, but I can't understand him. He talks very funny.
I can't understand it.
No, nobody does.
Yeah, no one does.
We're just pretending.
Little did she know that she was one of the group. She thought it was about her, but it was about me all that time. Thank you, Peter. It was incredible to be with you.
Thank you, Peter, for the storytelling and sharing.
Yeah, love you.
Okay.
We'll talk.
Yeah, love you guys. Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow. Really beautiful. I'm always astounded when you hear of people who went through these difficult periods and stood up to injustice. Just really stood up for it. Like they suffered the consequences. They didn't take the easy path. His dad could have easily gone to work in Germany and just lived out the days and just, fed the machine and been okay. So yeah, it's just incredible. Yeah. Tomorrow, we've got another great show.
We've got a psychic tomorrow, guys.
We have Delissa Hawking, who, as we've already had her once on the show, she basically said last time she was on the show, she said, you know what? We'll do card readings. Anyone that dials in that would like to have a card reading can have a card reading, which I thought was cool. And she did a reading for both of us last time, which I really enjoyed. Remember?
No.
She said she saw in my future that I was going to be doing media or doing, whatever we're now doing. So I guess in some ways I just continued doing the thing. But incredible to have her on. She's a lot of fun, and she's very enjoyable to be with. So I think anyone, if you want to come in, we will be sharing the link. And we'll invite in the comments. We'll invite you to come on. So if you're on and you're interested to get a reading, then we'll invite you on for a reading.
Please tune in. Is it the Facebook page or?
Yeah, you'll find it on the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel.
Or on YouTube. One of these two. Don't go to Andy's private page.
Yeah. Actually, it'll be easier that way. And so again, thanks for Peter Zeijderveld. What a beautiful time to be with him and hear about family. So we'll see you then tomorrow on A Wonderful Chaos.
Yeah.
Bye.